welcome everybody to the tasting this evening. 3 beautiful wines to get through, so we're super excited to do that. As always, a couple of introductions to make. I'm Luke Baldwin, one of the senior wine brokers here. We've got, of course, Mark Faber, our head wine buyer.
Happy to see you all, team.
Jane Moore. Jane's looking after the Facebook thread, the text-in competition, and basically keeping the wheels turning here. So welcome, Jane.
Good evening, everyone.
And of course, our guest this evening is Alex Head, winemaker at Head Wines. So a bit of introduction to Alex. Graduating from Sydney University with a degree in biochemistry, Alex first gained his experience through fine wine stores, importers and auction houses. He did vintages at Torbreck, Tyrrell's, Carrillo and Laughing Jack. And in 2006, Alex set up Head Wines. And since then, Alex has gained a really fantastic reputation for himself. Young Gun of Wine, People's Choice Award in 2013. And this year was a finalist for the Gourmet Wine Traveller Winemaker of the Year, which is amazing. Hugh and Hook said, Alex Head has done an amazing job in bringing a new kind of panache to Barossa's traditional varieties. He's introduced an extra touch of elegance without losing the region's essential generosity and softness. And I think the wines that we're tasting tonight really demonstrate that. So super excited to have you on board, Alex. Great to have you.
Thanks, Luke.
Awesome. So just moving forward, if you can move me on there, Mark, thank you. Just mention if you're planning your Thursday evenings in the foreseeable future, we've got a couple of more tastings on offer. The Italian summer wines next week will be very fun. We've got 3 of United Cellars' finest, trying to convince you that their wine is the best, so that'll be exciting. The week following, the summer of Riesling. And then finally, if you're into Semillon, this is one not to be missed. We're going to do a VAT 1 vertical with Bruce Tyrrell. So that is very, very exciting. So lots of good tastings to be had. Now, I should mention, we are also running the Wheel of Wine quiz. So if you haven't been to any of these tastings so far, we ask 2 questions between each wine. We get you to text in. Now, if you get a correct answer, you get 3 entries into the Wheel of Wine. If you get an incorrect answer, you get 1. We spin the Wheel of Wine at the end of the night, and if it lands on you, you get to basically your favorite wine for free. So it's all to play for. Just as an example, please text your name, your email, and of course your answer to the number on the screen there, and we'll get you entered in. So good luck with that. And then just finally, we always want these to be super interactive. So please feel free to unmute at any time and ask questions. Give us your feedback, give us your tasting notes. If you're not too kind of comfortable doing that, we've got the chat box. So feel free to use the chat box whenever you want, and I or Jane or Mark can get those questions answered. So great to have everyone on board, and moving forward, I'm going to hand over to Mark.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Luke, and welcome everyone to a fantastic tasting this evening. From a more personal perspective, Alex and I have worked together for several years now across several of my roles. His roles have not changed, of course, but everywhere I go, we always end up coming back together to do events and to sell wines together, because I am definitely attracted to the wines that Alex makes. He, as Hugh and Hook described very, very well, the Barossa, for me, the Barossa was heading in a direction that I think kind of needed to change. It was in a very old school direction. It was very big. The alcohol levels were getting incredibly high and kind of unmanageable in a way. And there was no elegance to the wines. And as the Australian palate kind of grew up, in my description, it grew up, we wanted more elegance and more, that same complexity, that same power, but you wanted just a little bit of a finer touch to it. And I think there are a handful of producers in the Barossa that are doing that really well. And I think Alex is absolutely one of those people. So I'm going to hand over to Alex to do a bit of your story. But first of all, I'm going to get everyone to, if you haven't already, we're going to be talking about the first wine, the Head Red. And just while Alex is talking about his history And Alex, I'll get you to give a little bit of a descriptor of this first wine as well as we go. So feel free to just kind of let this wine get you into what we're talking about. Okay.
Lovely, thanks, Mark. Hello, everybody. So, Head Wines. What is Head Wines? Well, at the moment, it's a real journey of discovery about making the best Rhone varietal style wines that I can out of what I consider to be one of the most untapped wine treasures in Australia, and that is the Barossa and the network of growers that and old vineyards that we have access to. In the Barossa, I started working with the Barossa about 20 years ago, and mainly selling wine through wholesaling and retailing. And it wasn't till about 15 years ago that I travelled to the Barossa solely to learn how to make wine from some of the best, or the producers that I thought were making the best wines at the time. Australian wine industry was pretty much dominated, or Barossa was pretty much dominated by producers that were making one particular style on the spectrum of wines, very rich, very heavy, powerful wines. And at the time, I could see there was a call or a small opening place where I could make my own sort of European-inspired Rhone-style wines in the Barossa. And that small amount of wine that I made 15 years ago has just grown ever so slightly each year. And I'd say back then I was pretty keen on picking early and using sort of a lighter touch. But over 15 years of winemaking, and I talk about that journey, we've really figured out that it's not just that simple. And in fact, it is about choosing the right sites, the right clones, working with the right growers, the right canopy management, and basically all the 1%ers, and working on those to produce not just a style on the spectrum, but the best wines that I can get into bottle, all of the time thinking about the balance and the way the wines interact with your experience at the table. So how do they go with the food, and also how do you feel after you drink the wine, which is a really, really important thing right from the beginning. Not necessarily saying that we want people to drink 2 bottles, but sharing a bottle with a friend should not be something that sits you on your bum and ends the night or ends the lunch because you're too intoxicated. So yeah, it's still a journey of learning, and I said before about the Barossa having this fantastic amount of growers and vineyards that we have access to. And the way Head Wines was set up was essentially a negociant style business. And this is a French term. There is no real English translation. But we work with as many growers as possible. And in that sense, we hedge our bets for what Mother Nature can throw at us. So we can't expect every vineyard to produce incredible fruit every year. And this kind of leads us into the main wine that's the driver of Head Wines, which is quite imaginatively named Head Red. And this is the wine that we work the most on, the most effort into. It is a blend of probably up to about 15 vineyards, and sometimes even more parcels. And it's a way where we can keep the quality as high as possible, and really have a representation of what was the vintage like in the Barossa, all the while keeping it typically Barossan in style. And hey, Denny, and you know, giving everyone a wine at sort of $35–40, but you know, we're not handing over that much money. So, you know, every year the wine is made relatively the same way, but it really speaks of the Barossa and the vintage, and that, to me, that's a really important, an important wine to speak about head wines and the Barossa. So, you know, how do we make a wine at that price point that's of such high quality? Well, obviously, as I said, we hedge our bets. We take fruit from many different soil profiles. There's probably 6 clones of Shiraz in there. We use 6 different barrel sizes, so from 225 all the way through to 2,500 litre. We use some whole bunch, which is where you keep the stems attached to the grapes during the fermentation. And then we crush some berries and we ferment some berries whole berry, some ferments whole berry. So there's all sorts of ways that we can create further complexity and deliciousness at that price.
Mate, I'll just interrupt you for a second there, if I may. So I'm just going to point out to everyone the Alex is kind of glossing over it a little bit, but the degree of difficulty involved in making a wine for this price point at this quality level. I mean, I'm just going to do a quick tasting note from my perspective as to what we get. I mean, as both Alex and I touched on, there was this specific style that was the Barossa that became kind of very famous in the 90s and the early noughties, of a really robust, very heavy, alcohol heavy, not really peppery Rhone style, tannic style, but very fruit forward. And it has definitely got some fruit character to it. I definitely know, I'm sure you'll all agree when you taste it, it's got that kind of red and blue fruit character to it, definitely. But I also get a lovely savory character in this wine. And we're going to go more into this, obviously, but there definitely is a kind of a Rhone touch to this. For any of you who have had any wines from the Northern Rhone especially, you'll definitely see, I'm not going to say it's a Northern Rhone wine at all, but there is a definite, there's kind of an echo of Northern Rhone within this wine. There's more of an earthiness, there's more of a kind of, it's less fruit, more earth, and the alcohol isn't as obvious, the fruit isn't as obvious, it's more kind of toned down. So just touch on that, yeah.
Danny, I know you've been doing a lot of wine tasting at the moment with your WSET course, and you said, you know, loving the Barossa Shiraz. What are your thoughts on this one? What are your tasting notes?
Yeah, Danny, what are your tasting notes?
No, I'm
No
loving it. I think it's great. We've let it decant for probably about an hour, and I think that's helped. But yeah, lots of lovely fruits.
Amazing. Cheers for that, Danny.
So we really do want to focus a lot in this tasting on the two wines, the blonde and the brunette, and there's a very specific reason for that, which definitely ties into Alex's story. So yeah, so very good point. Looking for dried herbs rather than dried fruits. That's a very good point. So,
Sorry.
We might just do a little bit of an image. We're going to go onto Google Maps now. We'll just see just a general picture. This obviously is kind of like a 3D map that I got from the Barossa, from the website of the Barossa Wine Institute. And now we're just going to go and just kind of see the overlay of where we are. And Alex, you've mentioned to me several times, this wine that we're drinking now is mainly Eden Valley fruit now.
Yeah, so we're 80% Eden Valley.
80%.
80%, yes. So and then it's about 10% blonde vineyard and 10% brunette vineyard in that wine. And look, I think for 10 years we were making head red Shiraz from about 80% Barossa Valley vineyards, and I wasn't getting the results that I was looking for. And as my knowledge of the Barossa got a bit better, we really started to see that we needed to move a lot more of our sources to the Eden Valley. And it's not so much that we we don't like the Barossa Valley, but just for the style, and we just had opportunities, and we always try to make wines that are less fiddled with, and the Eden Valley gives us that opportunity. So instead of head red being a 3-year proposition in the cellar, 3 to 5 year proposition, I think we're able to get this wine to give anyone who's interested 5 to 10 years of really interesting bottle age characters. And yeah, finding those really good sites, single vineyard sites in the Barossa Valley, is much harder. And yeah, so it was interesting to note on the map before, which was the flat map. I was looking at it was a bit easier to see, but all of my vineyards that we source from tend to come from the highest altitude points in the Barossa Greater. So Barossa is Barossa Valley on the left and Eden Valley on the right. And Barossa Valley is a drowned river valley with a deep aquifer under it. And all that strip of dark vineyard that you see, it's a lot more commercial vineyard through there. So more fruit-driven styles and heavier tons are produced. And a lot of the big companies source a lot of their fruit from those areas. And as you go up the Western Ridge, you go up in altitude from 220 to 380. And all of those smaller vineyard areas you see, this is where you start to get some of the single vineyard wines from. And then if you go over, that's all marine derived parent rock. So ironstone, limestone, a lot of red clays. But then if you go to the Eden Valley, so across the Barossa Valley, up the eastern slope, so from 380 to 500 metres in the Eden Valley, this is all, there's a fault line that runs through there, and a lot of this parent rock here is granite, which is all lava derived, so from underneath the earth, and this gives a very different profile to the fruit. And here there's no irrigation, so much lower yields. And you tend to see more of those dried herb characters, really interesting complexities. But I think you have a longer ripening period here because it's cooler as well. So you tend to get some lovely polymerization of tannins from the Eden Valley. But you can, just talking about that head red wine, if you draw a circle around the Barossa, all the points on that circle is pretty much where we source our fruit from. So from the bottom in Williamstown, going right to Springton and Eden Valley, north to McAlta, across to Stockwell, across to Mopper, then to Greenock, and then back down to Williamstown. So we kind of missed that middle of that mother section of the Barossa.
Which ironically is where some of the most famous Barossa estates are based.
Yeah, that's right. And those styles through the middle, that's the bread and butter for Barossa, and that's what Barossa was built on. And there are some incredible vineyards, very old vineyards through there, and they're obviously sewn up pretty tightly. But you know, Head Wines is always focused on, and I joked a bit before about dried herb, not dried fruit, but we probably look to produce a style of wine that is more on the elegant end of the spectrum.
Well, Danny's just mentioned that he gets a bit of Hunter in this, which I must admit I'm definitely agreeing with, because it's definitely got a, like I said before, it's got like a savoury element to it, and the alcohol doesn't poke out too much, so it's a little bit. I'm not going to say this is a medium-bodied wine, but in comparison to what a lot of Barossa exists out there, it's definitely more on the medium side.
That's right.
I'm looking at the time here, and I'm afraid we're running out of time here. So I'm going to have to move us on. We'll get back to you in a sec, but we just have to do this little quiz first.
Sure.
So Luke, I'm going to hand back to you.
Yep. So whilst you're getting your texts in, make sure wine number 2 is in the glass and ready to go. That's the blonde. So I'm going to read it out, and remember, just text to the number on the screen there with your name, your email, and the number of your chosen answer. So the Barossa Valley was named by Colonel William Light, one of South Australia's first surveyors. But what year was it named? So if we've got any history buffs, hopefully you should be able to get this.
I must say, this is a very, very tough one, and I thankfully know the answer, but this is a tough one because you've given us such a small gap of years here.
Well, I got accused of making the questions too easy last week, so I've really ramped them up. So we've got about 30 seconds left on that one.
I've just a full disclosure here. I have a group of my family who are in the room next to me now, and they're waving right now. And I'm just telling them to come and get the bottle of wine
now. You're giving the kids wine. What?
Giving the kids wine, exactly right. Because I of course, I have the wines here, and that they have to get themselves to get them to pour something.
Okay, let's give it 10 more seconds before we do the big reveal. Jane, how are the texts looking? Are we getting a few in?
We are, and not going to point fingers at anybody, but I feel like a couple of people might have Googled this one.
See, this is the one thing we can't get around. We can't stop people from Googling. So
you're only cheating yourself.
Well, I'd say that's probably us then.
Okay, so the answer was answer number 1, 1837. Barossa was named in honor of the memory of the Battle of Barossa, pronounced Barossa, which was a Spanish battleground where the British reached victory over the French on the 5th of March, 1811. During the March on Cadiz. However, the name was incorrectly registered as Barossa with 1 R, as it was misread. They misread the lettering. So that's how Barossa went from Barossa to Barossa.
And here we are today.
I hope I'm right there, Mark and Alex. If I'm not,
Sounds
I'll really
right.
embarrass myself there.
No, that's
sounds good enough to be true, mate. Good enough to be true.
Spot on, buddy.
Excellent.
Okay.
So let's move on.
So now we move on to all yours. I'm letting them keep the bottle of wine. I've got my glass. I'm good to go. So now we move on to the blonde, and I'm going to. So obviously a fantastic 95-point score here that Alex got on this vintage. But I'm going to hand the screen over to Luke, because here is where we really want to get into the geography of the Barossa, and as Alex was touching on before, he doesn't tend to go for that kind of valley floor, which is the hottest part, but he always kind of goes around the edges. So we start here with the blonde, and we've got some amazing. Alex has been very good in giving us the literal exact positions of each of these vineyards, And from a personal perspective, I was absolutely blown away by how tiny these vineyards are.
Yeah.
They really are. They're like little scraps of earth. So we're very lucky to have them. So Alex,
just before you jump in and start telling us, I thought, because you've mentioned that one of the big influences on this wine's a Rhone, and obviously Mark picked up on the Rhone there, that we have a quick look at Côte Rôtie. So I'm going to fly us over. This is the quickest flight you're ever going to do through COVID times.
Hold on, everyone. Hold on.
Sorry if this is a bit glitchy. There we go. Fly us over to the Rhone and then just zoom in on Côte Rôtie. So people basically get a reference about what we're talking about and what has influenced you. And then we'll move back to the single vineyards for the blonde, if that's okay for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, wow. There we are. So, this is the real inspiration for Head Wines. Being a lot younger back then, I thought I was going to make, how should I say this, cheaper, better value Côte Rôtie in the Barossa. And it's taken me quite some time to realise that obviously you can be inspired by it, but you're never going to completely copy the style. So you can see on the map here, essentially Côte Rôtie, it's probably 20 kilometres from north to south. We're looking south at the moment. You kind of split, roughly you can split Côte Rôtie into two parts. On the left is Côte Blonde and on the right is Côte Brune. And the soil types are very different. The blonde has a lot more sort of sand, limestone, I think a bit of mica, and it generally gives a bit more water availability to the vine, and it's this. I think it's this sort of marine-derived soil which really gives a real prettiness to the wine and gives it a lot of freshness. Aromatically, the wines tend to be a lot more open. And they do co-ferment, vineyard co-ferment a white grape called Viognier here with Shiraz. And it's in the old days, they initially co-fermented just to soften the reds, so they could drink them a bit earlier. But anyway, there's an old story about the guy who owns Côte Rôtie. He had two daughters, a blonde and a brunette, and the characteristics of the wine that came off Côte Blonde were similar to his blonde daughter, and the characteristics of the wine that came off Côte Brune were similar to the brunette daughter. And Côte Brune has a lot more iron, schist, and the wines tend to be more tannic, backwards, a lot tighter and more cellar-worthy wines. And when I went to the Barossa in 2006, the main focus was to really figure out if there were in fact similar soil rock profiles that could give us, that could give me not an exaggerated style, but get me as close as possible. And working in some of the small wineries in 06 and 07, I got to see a myriad of parcels from many, many vineyards, and a couple of them really stuck in my mind. And in particular, this parcel from Rod McDonald. He was the accountant for Penfolds, and when he retired, they told him, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you should buy this block of land and plant a vineyard on it. And you can see as we circle around at the house there, and that hill that the house is on is solid limestone, which is quite rare for the Barossa. And if you go 200 meters southeast, you can actually see a limestone quarry there. And if that's not a big enough clue or hint that if you're looking for limestone as a parent rock for your vineyard, this is the place. And as you jump over the back of that and go further south, I mean, all of that is not really plantable land. That's all cropping land. You can't just plant, as you know, you can't just plant vineyards anywhere. You have to have the right base. So and I did talk about wanting the fruit to come from the higher altitude sites. This is probably the lowest altitude and warmest site that we deal with. The only reason why it works is the limestone underneath the vineyard. And what it does is the excess calcium in the soil actually buffers out the potassium and in the grapes, and you tend to be able to get quite ripe characters in the wine while you hold on to acidity. So while the vineyards around this vineyard are becoming very ripe and the acidity is falling away, this vineyard tends to hold on to that acidity, and that's what makes it of such a high quality. This road.
I was just going to say, I'll just encourage everyone to. So Luke's done very well here. He's got 2 street views which really they show really closely the very unique soil types. So just keep an eye on the colour of the soil that you're looking at right now.
Yeah, if you go south down this road, I mean, this is the cutting where the road had to be cut through this hill. And on the left-hand side, you can see, the topsoil is a mixture of red clays and sandy loams, and then just underneath it, about 40 centimetres, you get solid limestone.
Just bricks of limestone, yeah.
Yeah, and this is what we first heard about this probably 50, 60 years ago when Coonawarra started marketing their soil type as Terra Rossa, which is a red clay over limestone. So it's really quite essential for high quality grapes. Anyway, so driving through that road on the way to work at Torbreck in 2006, it was really obvious to me that was a really special patch. And Sean Koleski, my winemaking friend, said, "Oh, I know the guy. This is the parcel of wine here. We're making it." And I was like, "Oh, this is amazing. How do I get access to this?" So, a day later, and a handshake and a beer, and the blonde was born. And I didn't even know if it was going to be the wine that it was going to be. We just, it was just working off a hunch. And, it took us probably 3 years before we won a trophy at the Barossa Wine Show for it. And now it's probably, after Head Red Shiraz, it's probably our second best selling wine. So
I'll just point out from my perspective, my kind of student perspective. So soils are something that are obviously a really, really important part, as Alex is definitely hinting at. But I think something that the French are always going on about is limestone. Limestone is kind of the centerpiece of a huge number of their best vineyards in their best regions. So Champagne is basically just a block of limestone that they're on. Burgundy is all on a hill of limestone, a little spine of limestone. The Rhone has patches of limestone. It's mainly granite, igneous granite. But yeah, all of the Loire Valley is all limestone, a little shell of limestone. So it's really important for a lot of global winemaking. So it's very, very interesting, and it's so funny that you say after Coonawarra got on the Terra Rossa bandwagon that we decided that we should maybe advertise what we've got. But it's kind of the proof is in the pudding. The wines had been planted since the 1850s, and they'd obviously been producing something pretty special already. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we've got some of this limestone here, don't we?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Hey, I just have to say something quickly. Just in that little spiel there about the wine, I made a mistake. It's 100% whole berry, not 100% whole bunch. It'd be a very different wine if it was 100% whole bunch.
Let's blame Mr. Halliday for that, because this is taken directly from.
Oh, is it? Oh dear. There you go.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Keen to open up the floor to any questions or tasting notes. There's not much going on the chat. No, Michael has come in. The blonde was exceptional, balanced, and just such a pretty wine, so fragrant. Alex, was that what you were intending with this wine, for it to be that kind of pretty, fragrant style?
Absolutely. That vineyard just gives us fruit characteristics that you don't get anywhere else, and that is stone fruit. So you get a peach skin, you get this nectarine. Obviously now power of suggestion, but if you go and look for those characteristics, you should see them. So blue fruit, Stonewell Marananga just has this really, really interesting stone fruit profile, and that's why it actually goes very well with a small amount of Viognier co-fermented, because the Viognier, if you add an apricot to a nectarine or a peach, it doesn't upset the balance. But if you add Viognier to green, stemmy, chocolatey characters and mulberry, like in the brunette, it doesn't work. So, but yeah, we really like the prettiness of that side.
Yeah, and Thomas has added great length, which I actually agree with. I kind of drunk that wine 10, 15 seconds ago, and I'm still getting that length coming through, which is lovely. Let's pick on somebody. David, would you care to unmute and give us your thoughts?
I guess I haven't really formed an opinion about it. I get a lot of sulphur on the nose, so I don't know if it's just not enough healthy cheese tonight. It could just need a bit more time to breathe.
Yeah. Also depends on how deep your glass is too. So sometimes if you lift your nose even a centimetre or 2 centimetres higher, you move away from the volatile characters of the wine and you just see the fruit.
It's a very nice wine. I just haven't. Sometimes it takes me a couple of goes to form an opinion.
Yep. That's the beauty of wine.
That is.
Indeed. So yeah, that's good feedback from Lee. So delicious. So pastel compared to the fluoro of traditional Barossa.
That's the best tasting note I've seen for a while, I think.
Well, I'm very proud to say that's my brother-in-law, and I've taught him everything he knows. So,
Good stuff.
So,
yeah, I should add, head red. With head red, we don't build the wines the way we do the blonde and the brunette. So head red is pop, pour, enjoy. Whereas these wines are the kind of the pinnacle of cellaring styles. Although you can obviously drink them now, most of the wines that we have from 07, 08 and 09 are just coming into a really lovely window of drinking. So I do encourage you to decant these wines and to give them some air and enjoy the journey of aromatics over time. And they will, in fact, they'll keep for 3-4 days. They're wines that will live for not forever, but yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think that wraps up the blonde quite nicely with about 20 minutes left of the tasting, which brings us very nicely on to the brunette. But before we do that, we have another text-in quiz. So Mark, if you could just move us on to the next slide, if you would. Beautiful. So I spent far too long researching this question, so I hope everybody has a good crack at it. The question is, which band/singer has not written a song with hair color in the title? Is it answer 1, Bruce Springsteen, 2, In Excess, 3, Bruno Mars, or 4, Nina Simone? So remember, text into that number with your name, email address, and your answer, the number answer, and good luck.
I am absolutely clutching at straws with this one. Clutching at straws. So while we're doing this one, I thought I'd just do a little semi joke, but basically just a kind of a comparison, because we keep talking about Cote Rôtie, which it's basically the touchstone for a lot of Shiraz or Syrah producers around the world. I know a lot of guys from New Zealand that really pull on a lot of Gimlet Gravels, Hawke's Bay, Syrah. They do a lot of research into the style of Cote Rôtie. Even in America, they love those kind of Rhone styles. So, and I wanted to kind of show here, there are obviously differences, when it was established, 100 BC versus, 1840s. So maybe a little bit of a difference there. Area under vine is obviously a little bit different. A lot of people don't realize how big the Barossa actually is at 11,500 hectares compared to 310 in Cote Rôtie. But then, of course, you've got a lot of similarities. So obviously Shiraz, Syrah being genetically identical, the same thing. So that's a similarity. Hot, dry climates are obviously a similarity. And then the negligible rainfall I had to mention, because it's kind of one of those things that's a constant issue for you as a winemaker in the Barossa. So, but I think that's pretty much going to wrap us up here. So I cannot help with the answer here, Luke. Do we think that's the...
Well, until yesterday, I couldn't either. But so I'll give you the singers and the bands. Bruce Springsteen, Red-Headed Woman, named after Patti Schaeffer, who he married in 1991. In Excess, obviously, Suicide Blonde, released in 1990. This was a hard one. Nina Simone, Black is the Color of My True Lover's Hair. She did a cover of that in 1965. So, of course, the answer is Bruno Mars. I don't listen to any Bruno Mars music, so I wouldn't know. But that was the first artist that popped into my head. So well done to anybody who got that, because I'm very impressed if you did.
I am
you
going to
deserve
say,
all the points you get.
I am going to say, I feel like people Googled less, which obviously means less people got it right. But for those who did, good work.
Good guessing. Good guessing. Okay, so this now brings us on to wine number 3 tonight, the Brunette. So again, I might hand the screen over to Luke, who can show us where exactly this vineyard is. Again, amazed by how small this vineyard. So just to orient ourselves again, we'll just take a quick trip back to the Côte de Brune, which is just up a little bit further north from Côte Blonde. And Alex, I'll hand over to you, mate. So kind of what your influences are and what what you want to do with this wine.
Yeah, so I mean, some of the greatest Syrahs I've ever had the pleasure of drinking came from the Côte Brune. This is an area highly sought after wines from many collectors and restaurants around the world. Yields here tend to be a little lower. The soil has an ability to produce smaller bunches and smaller berries, and the fruit profile tends to be darker fruits, more spice, more chocolate, more gamey, roasted meat, I suppose dried meat characters. And you also tend to start to see things like olive tapenade and some of those black olive characters And one of the really interesting things about Syrah from this area is the use of stems in the fermentation and the way it adds this sort of haunting perfume and also adds another layer of tannin to the wine. And because of the long ripening period here, so very cold, right on the latitude, the highest latitude that you can actually get Shiraz right. And these wines tend to be really the stems kind of become part of the wine, and you don't just have the stems sitting at a separate place to the fruit. So the real challenge for me in trying to take inspiration from these wines is how do we find a site in the Barossa where we have similar soil, a similar altitude, aspect, slope, and then how do I utilize the stems to replicate this character, which I absolutely adore at the table with food, with your gamier meats and things like duck, and particularly things like deer or some of the really gamey forest meats. Anyway, so in the north of the Barossa, the old growers called it Grange country, and it's very, very low rainfall, and it tends to be, as well as particularly warm, tends to be extremely cold at night. And being cold at night really helps with retention of acidity. Now, when I was in the Barossa in 2006, I noticed, and you probably, I don't know if you guys can see me or behind me, but there's a picture of the Brunette vineyard, or the top of the hill just there. And that is the highest elevated vineyard on the western ridge of the Barossa Valley. It's actually at the elevation of Eden Valley. But the really strange thing about the vineyard is it has the soil, well, it's not strange, but it has the soil of that Grange country. So that's that deep red clay ironstone, which gives you the characteristics of the Côte Brune. Now, the vineyard also faces east, which is, in the Barossa, a heaven send. It is what you want, because if you catch afternoon sun in the Barossa, it's very difficult to make high quality wine. So everywhere in Moppa is good to grow grapes, but on the top of Moppa Hill facing east, in my book, when I first found this vineyard, was like, the best place I could achieve what I wanted to. You can see the red soils as this is Moppa Road, you can see how different the soils are here. And these red clays are up to 20 metres deep. Interestingly, the Brunette comes from the two vineyards on the top of Moppa Hill. One's called Block 6, and the other one I just call Love Day. So where the bottle is, that's Block 6, and then that's spur pruned. So we have two different types of pruning in the Barossa. So Block 6 is spur pruned, and then just to the right is the Love Day block, and that's cane pruned, and that's much lower yielding, and it has seams of ironstone running 10 to 20 centimetres below that block. So those two blocks create the Brunette, and we use maybe 20% whole bunch. We only use Burgundian, specially coopered Burgundian oaks, mainly from what I consider to be the best forest, which is Tronchet, which is a little forest within Allier, the forest, Allier Forest. And we generally throw the book at this wine. One of the really winemaking book, I should say. One of the other really good parts about this wine, and for aging, is the alcohol is always a little bit lower. So this wine is 13.8. In Barossa, it's almost unheard of.
That is a new low. That's what have you done to it, mate?
Well, it's just that site. We can get ripeness at much lower sugar levels, and also that site, because it's 2 degrees cooler than the blonde site on average, we tend to have much lower pH as well. So you get those wonderful purple colours, and it really does. It tends to age very well. And of course, a lot of this stuff I didn't really understand in 2006, 2007. So it's really, it's really developed, and my ideas and the vineyard has developed over that time. This vineyard was actually pulled out in the early 80s, and it would have been a 100-year-old vineyard. And it was replanted about 25 years ago by the current owner.
I was just about to say, I remember you mentioning that this it's a relatively new vineyard, 25 years old is kind of 25 years for me is when it starts to hit its straps as a vineyard. But I just find that amazing that 25 years ago or it would have been 30, 40 years ago, they would have considered this vineyard to be kind of not non-viable, but less of an attractive vineyard. Whereas if you were to run the same exercise today within the Barossa, and you were to say to a lot of the makers there, or a lot of the growers there, what's viable and what should we hold on to, I can almost guarantee you that the Mopper Hill would be untouched compared to what we were doing kind of 30, 40 years ago. Yeah,
I mean, the plan for this vineyard is to really take it back to what it used to be. And I mean, if the original vines were on that site, I mean, the price or the and the quality would obviously be even higher. But I may not have been able to afford the grapes to make the wine. But if you go a kilometre northwest from this site, there is a 100-year-old vineyard, and those grapes are nearly three times the price. They obviously won't give the same quality, but it just makes the Brunette just such a special, unique wine. To have that power, that elegance. The palate is very linear, which is an Eden Valley character, but you have this mulberry chocolate, which is Mopper. So it's kind of Eden Valley and Grange Mopper at the same time, which is just so special. And there's no other wine like this. You can go 200 metres down the hill, and the wines are just not the same. The quality just isn't there. So you go back to a head red level very quickly as you come down that hill.
Yeah. So just a few words from as you've been talking, Alex. So that kind of the chocolatey berry flavors, which I definitely get from David's. That's that kind of slight juiciness, but not being overly big and fat. The that kind of power with elegance that Thomas said, and Alana said here, the aroma is more classically Shiraz, but integrated and delicate. So for me, I mean, like you said, the power of suggestion is always an interesting one to take into account when we're doing wine tastings. However, I really, really honestly get an ironstone. I would call it almost a sanguine character in this wine.
Yeah, blood, iron.
exactly right. I get a real irony, almost bloody character in this, which, in all honesty, is why it goes so perfectly well with what you said before with venison or duck.
Venison,
those gamey styles. So I really, and I would encourage you guys to really see if you can get that kind of ironstone character. If you don't know what I mean by that, like that kind of bloody character, which sounds terrible, but
at 3 years, the wine always, the puppy fat peels away, and you always start to see that. And I always think I sound silly when I say it, but it's like a rusty iron gate character.
Yep. Definitely.
I don't go around licking rusty gates, but yeah, it's a ferrous iron oxide character, and I don't know if you got rusty nails in the shed and it's a real and it literally comes directly from those ironstone rocks in the vineyard and that red clay. Which is all that marine derived, a mixture of limestone and iron oxide. But yeah, look, and for me, it just takes me there. Smelling that takes me to Mopper and that, Kalimna, Mopper, all those sort of old Penfolds, Grange areas,
So a very interesting analogy here between the blonde and the brunettes. We've got, comparing Marilyn Monroe versus Jennifer Lawrence. That's the more obvious big style compared to the more kind of subtle style, which is a good analogy there, Lee. So that's fantastic, mate. We really appreciate it. And we have, I think we're all right to go. Yeah, time is against us, as it always is in these events. Now, how are we going with the Wheel of Wine there, Jane?
Got lots of entries, which is awesome. We've got all of our text-ins there. Luke's just putting the Wheel of Wine together as we speak. Whilst we're waiting for that, Team Altitude just commented about the wines. I was just curious to see, because you guys have a few people in the room, do we have a consensus on the favourite wine of the three, or are we all divided?
I was thinking you guys were very dressed up for a tasting.
Feel free to unmute.
There we go.
There we go.
Here we go.
There you go. You're on speaker.
No consensus whatsoever. I'm for number one.
You think we're left for good?
Greg?
We're on speaker.
I'm for number two. Number one. I'm a number two myself. There you go. So
Split.
we did just get dressed up for you all as well tonight. You're quite right. We are very for a wine tasting. But,
we very much appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Right. Glad it's not just me in the suit,
And Sally, I saw that you guys unmuted. I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to add a comment there. Feel free, we'd love to hear them.
No, we both love the brunette, but I actually like the blonde more than Robert did. They're just incredibly different. A great example of the difference between the soils and the rock. Incredible. I haven't done a contrast like that between the limestone and the ironstone before.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic point there, Sally. Thank you very much. And I definitely agree. This is one of the strengths of the Barossa that I think we as a wine industry really need to be focusing more on. I mean, you look towards Europe and it is all about terroir. It's all about those small vineyards and individual plots and tasting the differences between them. And we've got that. We've just shown that tonight. We've got that right here in front of us. We've got that story and we just need to tell it.
Alex, if you can limit this, if it's possible, limit it to 30 seconds because we're coming up to the end of the tasting. But on a personal note, and I'm sure Jane and Mark would kind of echo this, we've had Barossa winemakers in on these tastings over the last, 6 months or so. And a lot of them have spoken about 2018 being quite a challenging vintage, but a very good vintage. And I've noticed obviously all of these wines are 2018. Could you sum that vintage up for us in 30 seconds or so?
Yeah, really quickly. So 2018 and 2012 are the two best vintages that I've been involved in 15 years. They come after La Nina. So there's a lot of groundwater available. There's not a lot of stress, and they tend to be mild vintages with cool nights. So you'll see slightly lower alcohols. That allows the fruit to be better expressed, and it also allows the wines to age a lot better. So yeah, in general, or for me, I think 18s are some of the best. Well, they are the best wines we've made. And then, if you look ahead to 19, really dense, darker wines, perhaps not the complexity, but if you like power, 19, and then 20 is a bit of a mix of 18 and 19. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, 30 seconds on the dot, right?
Yeah, and do you know what? That leads us very nicely to just let everybody know that if you are interested in buying these wines, we have got a special offer for everybody who's attended these tastings. So the text there is at the bottom of the screen. Love this wine, text brunette, or feel free to text any of those wines, or just get in contact with us, and we'd love to take care of your order. So it's straight from the horse's mouth. This is one of the best Barossa vintages in a few decades.
Looking good. I'll be honest, looking bloody good.
Yeah, I'm just going to share a poll which was launched to give everyone an idea. It is really quite an even split between the blonde and the brunette.
Neck and neck.
Yeah.
Oh, that was me, Head Red SHIRAZ. That was me. Someone had to do it.
Mark, we are all ready to go to spin the wheel of wine. Were there any comments or questions just before we do that? I can't see any.
I think we've covered pretty much everything here.
Just wanted to know a little bit about Ali's adventures that are going on in Rome at the moment. Just saw her on Facebook.
Well, yes, Ali's not been joining us this week because he's representing Jancis Robinson in the Rhone Valley. You'll see on our social media pages he's been doing a daily update as to where he is. He just was in Clos de Pape this morning, and he's been all around. Did 3 hours of non-stop barrel tasting this morning, which from 8 a.m. till 11 a.m., which has kept him busy. So you'll see his very red teeth at the end of that. If you're interested, have a look on our social media.
Yeah, so feel free to follow along. I think that's a really nice way to kind of give some of these wines some context, because Ali is exploring the Rhone, especially the southern Rhone, and it allows you to kind of hear it from the horse's mouth. Mark, I'm ready to spin the wheel of wine if Jane and yourself are ready to go.
Go for it.
Good to go.
Okay.
Hopefully good luck, everyone.
Can see that. I'm actually super impressed by the amount of names on this. Obviously, my questions weren't hard enough. I have to make them a little bit harder next week. So good luck, everybody.
I don't know if you can make them harder. God.
A lot of people got the first one right, but the second one, not so many.
Very glad to know we've got so many history buffs on our hands here. Hey, Lee Scully.
Congratulations, Lee. Very well done.
All right. Thank you, guys, for coming along. As we mentioned before, still plenty more events to go within this calendar year. If you're interested, we're doing some focuses on some summer wines as well, which I think is going to get more and more relevant as we get into the warmer days and nights. But from us, from the crew here at United Cellars, Alex, I just wanted to say thank you so much, mate. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your marvellous wines. And thank you for sharing your story with us, mate.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me along. And good to see everyone. I've just figured out how to see everyone's faces. So, yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
I'll make it a bit easier for you. There we go.
Hey, there you go. Hey,
There's everyone there. Thank you all so much for coming along tonight. Thank you for being a part of this. As always, thank you for joining us. It's been always a great joy to do this every Thursday night, to sit in my house and drink wines with you all. So it's been great. Thank you to my team, Jan and Luke. Every time you make this easy for me, thank you very much. And enjoy your evening, everyone. And we'll catch you soon.